Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I am going to be showing you how to make music like Oneohtrix Point Never. So this video has been requested a ton, and as usual, you get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because they will be available shortly. And yeah, let's dive in. So, the first sound I've got here, this is the loop you heard in the intro, is this chord synth, which sounds like this. And so the way that I made this sound was using Ableton's analog. I'll talk about that in a moment, but first I want to show you the notes. So these chords may look a lot more complex than they actually are. What these are is these are all just basic major and minor ninth chords. So OPN, Oneohtrix Point Never, whatever you want to call him, uses a ton of these kind of chords. Like he doesn't usually use just like basic major and minor chords. Usually, he'll have like some extra voices in there. Like in this case, for example, I used ninth chords. You could also do seventh chords, even like 11th chords, 13th chords, diminished chords, all kinds of crazy stuff. But the point is, you kind of have to look a little bit outside the box. Like you can't just do like basic major and minor chords for the style, because the thing is, like, this music, the detail is really in like each individual instrument. I've noticed. Like that's the thing that Oneohtrix Point Never does really well, is rather than making like the whole track this huge, many layer complex thing, a lot of times they'll have like a pretty simple kind of thing. Like in this case, for example, you can see I've only got 7 tracks, but then it's like really a lot of attention to detail with the individual instruments. So that's kind of like the goal here. By using these cool chords, we're paying more attention to these chords and trying to get more mileage out of it, so to speak, musically speaking at least. So yeah, like I said, these are just basic major and minor ninth chords, and what I've done here is I've taken the different voices in the chords and just kind of spread them across the keyboard. So the first thing that I did here was I took the root note and I doubled it up in octave down. That's the root note of the first chord. So I doubled that up an octave down and then an octave down from that. Which you can hear, this is pretty quiet. If I turn this up, yeah, you can hear it. Like I said, it's just taking those notes and then doubling them up. And then I doubled up the 5th down an octave as well. And then I took the 3rd and put those up, I think like 2 octaves. Yeah, 2 octaves. So here are the original chords, just so you can kind of see what they would look like. So that would be like a basic chord. And then, yeah, I just did all that stuff. And again, what this does is it kind of like just makes the chord a lot more detailed. It gives it more like musical texture, like not so much texture in the sonic sense, but texture in the sense of like the concept of texture. Like what texture is sonically, this is that, but like as far as just programming in chords goes. So that's why I made those. And that's pretty much it. Like again, all these chords pretty much follow that. The only thing I did extra was I added this little C here. Or F, excuse me. I had that F there, which is just kind of playing in that one part there to sort of bridge the gap between the parts. So then, for the sound on this one, like I said, I made it with analog. So what we've got going on here is I've got 2 saw waves, a little bit of white noise, and then those are going into a low-pass filter, which I actually didn't touch. It's just kind of on there. I do have the resonance up a little bit. So you can hear when I turn that down, it's a bit darker. So yeah, it just kind of adds a little bit of brightness to the sound. Then after that, I've got the amp envelope set like this. You can see I've got a little bit of attack, and then I've got the sustain down a little bit. This is another one of those things, like I was saying, like kind of putting a lot of attention into the detail of like each thing. Like if you add this attack here, and that little sustain drop, I guess, it kind of like, yeah, it just kind of makes it come to life a little bit more. Like if I just have it like this, like just basically like a flat brick, it's just like flat and kind of simple. But then when we add that, yeah, it just makes it a little bit more interesting. So then after that, I've just got a bit of vibrato. You can see I've got a pretty high amount there at 67%, and I've got the rate at 6.4%, and then I've got a bit of unison. And then the only thing with that unison is, since there are so many voices playing in this chord, voices being like the notes that are playing in these chords, I did go in here and I changed the voices to 32. So it just allows you to play 32 notes at once. I think by default it comes at 8, and there are more than 8 notes playing in all of these chords, so you just wouldn't hear all of them. So important thing to do, because when you use the unison, it's doubling it up. So instead of having like however many voices are in each of these chords, you have twice that. So yeah, you got to go in and do that stuff. So then after that, I've just got a bit of chorus. Pretty simple, just gives it some space and some dimension. And then I've got this echo, and what the echo is doing is you can see I've got the ears are not linked, the left and right ear, they're not linked, and then I've got them on the time setting, so it's not synced, it's just going on milliseconds. So the goal of having these at 2 different times is you create a wider stereo image, because what happens is you're hearing very similar but slightly different things in each ear. And yeah, it creates this big stereo image when you hear, like I said, like when you hear those, it kind of splits the sound a bit. So then after that, I'm just got an EQ8, cutting out the low end, and that's pretty much it for the chords. The next thing I have here is this M1 piano, which sounds like this. So what this is it's a sample of the Korg M1 piano. It's that sound. You may recognize this from like a lot of house and techno, or maybe not so much techno, but like a lot of like house and like deep house and like old school house as well. It's a very, very popular sound in that style of stuff, and Oneohtrix Point Never uses it a lot as well. And I think the reason why is because it kind of has like that 90s sort of like old school kind of like vibe. You know, like it has that cool kind of like very bright piano sound that's really nice, juxtaposed with these kind of like more ambient synths. And so what I'm doing with this one here is I have it playing this polyrhythm. And what a polyrhythm is basically like, so we have these chords are happening in a matter of bars, right? Like you hear this, and then switches to this chord at the 5th bar, and then switches to this chord at the 7th bar. That's very straightforward. But then this thing is constantly like sort of resetting. Like you can see, the pattern is basically this. It's those 2 notes, and then those 2 notes, and then that little space there. And so the pattern is actually resetting here. So this is a polyrhythm because we're having multiple rhythms happening at once. That's the word poly kind of means that. We have the rhythm of this piano, which is, like I said, kind of irregularly resetting, and then we have the rhythm of basically everything else, which is just happening, like I said, in a matter of bars. So that's kind of the goal there. And what happens is you get this cool like rhythmic kind of thing going on. And this is important because in this style, you really don't have a lot of drums. Like Oneohtrix Point Never doesn't really use them too much. But yeah, having something like this kind of still keeps like something rhythmic in the track. And that's another reason why I like the sound for this too. Is it's just so like it has such a, you know, it has such a hard attack, and it really hits nicely like that. So the way I made this was I just had this sample. I put it into a little simpler here. And I'm playing a C. It's just playing one note and then an octave of that note. Yeah, C, it's just kind of fit in the key of the track. So then after that simpler, I've got a little bit of echo here. You can see I've got it on 16 notes. Pretty simple. Just kind of helps to accentuate the rhythm. And then after that, I just have an EQ8 cutting out the low end. So that's it for the piano. Next thing we have here is the bass, which sounds like this. So this is just following the root notes of the chords. The only difference is I put the first note up an octave because it started down there, which as you can hear was just a little bit too low for this bass. So yeah, I put that up an octave. And yeah, this is a really simple bass. All it is just kind of like a respace type of sound. So you can see I've got 2 saw waves here in analog. The second one, or the first one I guess you would say, is detuned a little bit. And then I've got those going into a low pass filter. Again, pretty straightforward kind of respace sound. Just kind of filtering the detuned saw waves to get that kind of nice, like, moving bass. Then after that, I've got the amp envelope set like this. And then finally, I just have a bit of unison to give it a little bit more kind of like of that chorusy sound. Then after that, speaking of a chorusy sound, I've got a chorus on there. So this is just adding a bit more like width to the sound. And it kind of helps to bring it to life. You can hear it's very flat and kind of dull when I turn this off. But yeah, it really helps to bring it to life. And then the last effect I have on here is just a bit of saturation. All I've got is just a bit of drive on that. And that just kind of helps to like beef it up a bit at the end of the chain there. So that's the bass. The next sound we've got here is this lead, which sounds like this. So I was trying to create one of those sort of like angelic style leads that you hear very sparsely throughout Oneohtrix Point Never's music. Like what he'll usually do is he'll have something kind of like I've got here, where he'll have like the chords playing, and then he'll have some sort of like lead come in like that, just at like certain times. Like this one comes in basically on the second bar of each time, you can see. And then like something that kind of followed up like I have here. Like that thing, which I'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, this is like the first sort of lead. And the way I made this sound was using analog. So what I've got here is I've got a square wave. It's actually kind of like a pulse wave because you can see I'm on the square wave here, but then I've got the pulse width modulation on. So I've got the width at 24%, and then I've got an LFO on that. You can see I've got it up all the way actually at 1. And then yeah, the LFO is just set. It's pretty fast. That's what gives it that kind of like here, it's got kind of like an interesting texture to it. If I turn off that LFO, you can hear it's just kind of like very, very much just staying like in one place. But when we add that, it gives it some nice motion and kind of helps to bring it to life. So then after that, I've got the amp envelope set like this, just sort of like a quick, like plucky type of sound. Nothing really too crazy. And yeah, then the last thing I've got inside of analog here is just a bit of vibrato. You can see I've got the amount of 59%, and then the rate is like in between, I guess. It's not too fast, it's not too slow. Again, just kind of helps to bring it to life a little bit. Then after that, I've got some chorus to help give it some more space. You can see I've got a pretty slow rate and actually quite a bit of amount, but the dry wet isn't too high. You can hear it again. That's just helping to give it like a chorusy kind of like I said, like angelic sort of sound. Then after that, I've got an echo, which is set like this. I've got it doing 8th note triplets. And yeah, it's pretty wet. I mean, it's at 51%, so you can definitely hear it. Since this lead is so sparse, I wanted to have a lot of echo on this because it kind of like plays, and then you let the echo ring out for a long period of time. And then the last effect I have on there is just an EQ8 cutting out the low end to kind of clean it up a bit. So then the next thing I have on here is this little vocal stab, which sounds like this. So what this is one of those old school kind of like vocal one-shot samples. This one is actually a very famous one that Oneohtrix never uses a ton. It's from the CMI Fairlight, which was like a very, very early sampler back in the day. You can Google that and you will learn a lot about it. But yeah, that's what the sound is. It's just this little vocal one-shot, and I've got it playing these little things here. It's sort of like call and response between these two. Like you get that, and then you get, you know, like it's like that kind of thing. Like these two are sort of playing off of each other. So, like I said, the way I made the sound is I just put that sample in a sampler here, and then I've got a bit of reverb on it to give it some space. Similar to the echo with that lead, since it's so sparse and it's only playing like 1-2 times over the course of this loop, I gave it a lot of reverb to let it ring out for a long period of time. And then I just have an EQ8 on there cutting out the low end. So pretty simple with that one. So the next thing I've got here is this granular guitar sample, which I'll talk about in a second. It sounds like this. So the way I made this was I actually took this guitar sample, which I played in myself using my own guitar. It's just a C. And then I put it into this granulator. And if you don't know what the granulator is, I'm going to link it in the description. And if you get the project file and samples from this video in the description, you will get it as well. But basically all it is a granular synth. And what a granular synth is, it's very similar to a sampler where you play a sample back. But when a sampler would just play the sample from start to finish, a granular synth takes like different parts of the sample and kind of plays them out of order. So you can see that yellow line there that's jumping around. That's all the different parts of the sample that it's playing. And what you get from this is this really cool kind of sound. Where you can hear like it never sounds the same twice, and it's got this really organic kind of like warping thing. So I think Oneohtrix never uses this a ton. I've heard it in a lot of his music, and I really wouldn't be surprised. It's really good when you have like a sample like this that kind of has an attack and fades out, because you can hear like it jumps around between the smooth part and the sort of like clicky attack part, and yeah, it just sounds really good. So I'll show you the notes on this. It's just playing these. It's just kind of like something that fit under the chords. I feel like this helps to fill out that like low mid-range. When I turn it off, you can hear that range of the track is kind of empty. But you can hear, yeah, it just really helps to fill that out. And another thing it's doing is it's kind of adding rhythm as well. Like I was saying with that piano, like when you don't have drums, like if I just turn this and the piano off, it's just kind of like ambient, you know? But when you have stuff like this under it, it like gives it rhythm even if there isn't drums, or if there aren't drums. Excuse my grammar there. But yeah, so the way I made the sound, like I said, it's just the guitar sample in the granulator. You can see it. I've got it set like this. And then I've got that going into an auto pan. So the auto pan is just giving it some movement. You can hear that one. It's pretty pronounced. kind of simple, but it just helps again to give it some movement and like make it not just be in one space where everything else is like right down the center. Then after that, I've got a bit of reverb for some space, and then finally, I just have an EQ8 cutting out the low end. So the main thing I want to show you with this is like it's really not that hard to create these cool kind of like warped, different kind of like otherworldly sounds. You just need to get a little creative with it. Like I recorded this guitar sample, put it in the Granular synth, and yeah, it sounded pretty cool. So then the last thing we've got here is this little tom thing that I made, which sounds like this. So Oneohtrix Point Never doesn't really use drums that much in his music. He famously said,
"Drums are very hard. I'm not good at them, to be honest."
Me neither.
And yeah, so that's why I have this. It's just kind of like, you know, sort of at the end of every 4 bars, like resetting the pattern almost. Like it's kind of like just giving you a little fill and like a little taste of some drums. But it's not like a full-on like beat, you know? So the way I made this was using operator. Actually, it's a pretty simple FM sound. I just use these notes which are in the key of the track: G sharp, G, and then C. And then yeah, and then what it is I've got 2 sine waves here doing some FM. You can see it's like that. The second one is an octave up from the other one, and I've got these pretty like short envelopes on them. Then I just have those going into a pitch envelope, and then the pitch envelope is just adding more clickiness. So here's without that. You can hear it kind of sounds like not as much like a tom, but when we add that, it gives it that like impact and that like attack at the start of the sound. So pretty much it for this one. I just want to show you guys some techniques. Like I said, you guys requested this one a ton, so I wanted to bring it to you. And yeah, so that is me for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because they'll be available. Thank you so much, everybody. I love you all, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.